At my son's wedding reception, my husband of 32 years stood up, clinked his champagne glass, and announced to 200 guests, "I'm leaving Margaret for my secretary. Consider this my farewell party." The room went silent, except for my heartbreaking. First, let me thank you for watching Letters to Helen. Please subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your messages truly brighten my day. And today's special shout-out goes to Rebecca from Montana. Thank you for being part of our family. My name is Margaret, and I'm 63 years old. For 3 decades, I believed I was living the American dream. I met Robert when I was 28, working as a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital. He was 35, a rising accountant with big dreams and an even bigger smile. We married 2 years later in a small ceremony at my parents' church, and I thought I'd found my forever person. We built our life brick by brick. I worked double shifts to help him through his CPA certification. When he started his own firm, I handled the books for free, while still working full-time at the hospital. We saved every penny for our dream house, a colonial with white shutters on Maple Street. When our son David was born 3 years into our marriage, I took only 6 weeks off before returning to work, because we needed my insurance. For 32 years, I supported every dream, every goal, every ambition Robert had. When he wanted to expand his business, I co-signed the loans. When he talked about early retirement, I picked up extra shifts. When his mother got sick, I took care of her for 2 years until she passed, because Robert said he couldn't handle seeing her that way. In my purse, I still carried our wedding photo, the small black and white picture from 32 years ago, where we looked so young and hopeful. I'd moved it from wallet to wallet, purse to purse all these years, a reminder of the promises we'd made. I thought we were a team. I thought we were building something beautiful together. David's wedding to Sarah was supposed to be our crowning moment as a family. We'd been planning it for 18 months, ever since he proposed on Christmas morning 2 years ago. Sarah came from a wealthy family. Her father owned 3 car dealerships, but she was sweet and genuine, nothing like the spoiled rich girls I'd worried David might fall for. The wedding cost $47,000. Robert insisted we pay for half. Even though traditionally the bride's family covers most expenses, we need to show them we're equals, he said, adjusting his tie in our bedroom mirror. I won't have them thinking David married up because we couldn't contribute. I didn't mind. I'd been saving money in a separate account for years, putting away $50 to $100 whenever I could. It was my someday fund, maybe for a cruise when Robert retired, or to help with grandchildren someday. The wedding fund seemed like the perfect use for it. But as the wedding approached, Robert became distant. He worked late every night, claimed he was closing deals before the busy summer season. He started carrying 2 phones, his regular one and a newer iPhone he said was for work emergencies only. When I asked about it, he'd snap that I wouldn't understand the pressures of running a business. 3 weeks before the wedding, I found receipts in his jacket pocket. Dinner at Romano's, our special place where we'd had our first date. But I hadn't been to Romano's with him in over a year. The receipt was for 2 meals, a bottle of expensive wine, and chocolate mousse, his favorite dessert that I'd never liked. When I asked about it, he said it was a client dinner. "Since when do you take clients to Romano's?" I asked, holding the receipt. "Since I'm trying to land the biggest account of my career," he replied, not looking up from his newspaper. "Margaret, please don't start being suspicious now. I have enough stress planning this wedding." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. The night before the wedding, we had the rehearsal dinner at the country club. Robert seemed nervous, checking his phone constantly. During his father of the groom speech, he stumbled over his words and kept looking at someone in the back of the room. When I turned to see who, I noticed a young woman with short blonde hair sitting alone at a table near the exit. She was maybe 35, pretty in a professional way, wearing a navy dress that looked expensive. "Who's that?" I whispered to Robert during applause. "Who's what?" he asked, but his face flushed red. "The blonde woman by the exit. She's not family, and she's not with the wedding party." "Oh, that's Jennifer from the office. She helped coordinate some of the wedding details." I invited her as a thank you. Something cold settled in my stomach. In 32 years of marriage, Robert had never invited employees to family events. He always said business and personal life should stay separate. But it was the night before my son's wedding. I pushed the feeling down and focused on David and Sarah, radiant and happy at the head table. Tomorrow was going to be perfect. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, exactly as we'd hoped. I woke up at 6 in the morning in our hotel suite, ordered room service for Robert and myself, and spent 2 hours getting ready. I'd bought a mother of the groom dress in dusty rose, elegant but not attention-grabbing, exactly what the etiquette books recommended. Robert was quieter than usual as he got dressed. He kept checking that same second phone, typing messages with unusual intensity. When I asked if everything was all right with work, he said, "Just tying up loose ends before we're unreachable for the honeymoon." We weren't going on a honeymoon. We'd given up our planned trip to Ireland to help pay for the wedding. But I didn't correct him. Maybe he was thinking about David and Sarah's honeymoon to Hawaii. The ceremony was held at St. Catherine's Cathedral, the same church where Robert and I had married 32 years earlier. Walking down the aisle as mother of the groom, I felt overwhelming pride. David looked so handsome in his black tuxedo, and Sarah was breathtaking in her grandmother's vintage lace gown. During the vows, I caught Robert wiping his eyes. I reached over and squeezed his hand, thinking how emotional he must be feeling. Watching our only child get married, he squeezed back, but when I looked at his face, he wasn't looking at David and Sarah. He was looking at his phone, which was buzzing with messages. The ceremony was perfect. The photographer captured beautiful moments of our family together. David's college friends gave touching readings. Sarah's little niece scattered rose petals down the aisle. Everything went exactly as planned. After the ceremony, we had an hour break before the reception, while the wedding party took photos. Robert disappeared during this time, saying he needed to check on something at the venue. I stayed with my sister Linda, greeting guests and making sure everyone knew where the reception was being held. "You look beautiful, Maggie," Linda said, using my childhood nickname. "And Robert seems different today. Is everything okay?" I should have listened to that instinct. Linda had always been intuitive about people, but I brushed off her concern. "He's just emotional about David getting married. You know how men get about their sons growing up." The reception was held at the Grandview Country Club, overlooking the lake where Robert and I used to walk when we were dating. The ballroom was decorated with white roses and gold accents, exactly as Sarah had dreamed. 200 guests filled round tables, and a jazz quartet played softly in the corner. I spent the cocktail hour moving from table to table, thanking people for coming, making sure elderly relatives had comfortable seats, coordinating with the catering staff. This was what I did best, taking care of everyone, making sure every detail was perfect. Robert was supposed to be helping me, but he kept stepping outside to take phone calls. As I arranged place cards that had shifted, our old wedding photo slipped out of my purse and fluttered to the floor. A stranger picked it up and handed it back to me, smiling. "What a beautiful young couple," she said, looking at that faded image. Robert and me so hopeful, so certain of our future. I felt a strange chill. "Where's Dad?" David asked during the cocktail hour, looking around the room. "Just handling some last-minute business," I replied, straightening his bow tie. "You know how he is about work." "On my wedding day?" David frowned. "Mom, that's not like him." He was right. Robert had always been focused on work, but family occasions were sacred to him. He'd never missed a school play, a graduation, or even a parent-teacher conference for business. The fact that he was taking calls during David's wedding reception should have been a massive red flag. When dinner was served, Robert finally returned to our table at the head of the room. He seemed agitated, kept adjusting his tie and checking his watch. The blonde woman from the rehearsal dinner, Jennifer, was seated at a table in the middle of the room, and I noticed Robert's eyes kept drifting toward her. During the salad course, I leaned over to him. "Robert, you seem distracted. Is there an emergency at work?" "No emergency," he said, cutting his lettuce with unusual precision. "Just preparing for what comes next." I assumed he meant his father of the groom speech. He'd been working on it for weeks, practicing in his study when he thought I couldn't hear. I'd offered to help him write it, but he said he wanted it to be personal, from his heart. The meal progressed beautifully. David and Sarah looked radiant, feeding each other cake and dancing to their chosen song, At Last, by Etta James. I watched them and remembered our own wedding. How young and hopeful we'd been. How certain we were that love would conquer everything. After the main course, the DJ announced it was time for speeches. Sarah's father went first, giving a touching welcome to David and sharing funny stories about Sarah's childhood. David's best man followed with jokes about college adventures and heartfelt words about true love. Then it was Robert's turn. He stood up slowly, straightening his jacket. A server handed him a champagne glass and he tapped it with his knife. The room quieted, 200 faces turning toward our table expectantly. "Good evening, everyone," Robert began, his voice carrying clearly across the room. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate David and Sarah's special day." Standard opening. I smiled encouragingly at him. "I've been married to Margaret for 32 years, he continued, and I felt a warm glow of pride. 32 years of building a life together, raising our son, supporting each other through good times and bad. Where was he going with this? His practice speech had started with a joke about David's childhood fear of vegetables. "But sometimes," Robert said, his voice getting stronger, "sometimes life takes unexpected turns. Sometimes we realize that the path we've been on isn't the path we want to finish on." The room was completely silent now. I could feel tension building, like the air pressure before a thunderstorm. So tonight, as we celebrate new beginnings for David and Sarah, I want to announce a new beginning of my own. My heart started pounding. This wasn't the speech he'd practiced. Robert raised his champagne glass higher, and I saw his hand was shaking slightly. "I'm leaving Margaret for my secretary, Jennifer. Consider this my farewell party." The words hit me like a physical blow. The room erupted in gasps and shocked murmurs. I heard someone's chair scrape back violently. A wine glass shattered somewhere behind me. David shot to his feet, his face white with rage. "Dad, what the hell are you doing?" David shouted across the silent ballroom. But Robert wasn't looking at David. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking directly at Jennifer, who had turned bright red and was shaking her head frantically, clearly mortified by this public declaration. I sat frozen, the dusty rose dress I'd chosen so carefully, suddenly feeling like a costume for a play I hadn't auditioned for. 200 people were staring at me. Family, friends, colleagues, people from our church, people from our neighborhood, people who had watched us build our life together for over 3 decades. "Robert," I whispered, but my voice came out as barely a croak. He finally looked at me then, and I saw something I'd never seen in his eyes before. Complete indifference. Not anger, not guilt, not even pity. Just nothing. "I'm sorry, Margaret," he said, loud enough for the entire room to hear. But I refused to pretend anymore. Jennifer and I have been together for 2 years. We're in love, and we're moving to Phoenix next month to start fresh. 2 years. While I was working double shifts to save for his early retirement, he was building a new life with someone else. While I was taking care of his dying mother, he was making plans to leave me. While I was excited about growing old together, he was falling in love with someone young enough to be our daughter. Sarah was crying now, her beautiful wedding makeup ruining. David was standing between our table and Jennifer's, looking like he wanted to physically fight his own father. Linda had moved to stand behind my chair, her hands on my shoulders. "You bastard!" someone shouted from the back of the room. I think it was Robert's own brother, Tom. Robert set down his champagne glass with deliberate care. "The marriage has been over for years. We both know it. I'm just finally being honest about it." That's when something inside me broke, not my heart. That had shattered the moment he said Jennifer's name. Something deeper. Something that had been holding me together for 32 years. I stood up so fast my chair toppled backward. The crash echoed through the silent ballroom like a gunshot. "Honest?" I heard myself saying, my voice stronger and clearer than it had been in years. "You want to talk about honesty, Robert?" He looked startled. In 32 years of marriage, I had never raised my voice at him in public. I was the supportive wife, the understanding partner, the woman who handled problems privately and presented a united front to the world. You want to be honest? I repeated, moving around the table toward him. Let's be honest. I reached into my purse, the small beaded clutch I'd bought specifically to match my mother of the groom dress, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. My hands were surprisingly steady. "This is the deed to our house," I said, holding it up so everyone could see. "The house I've been making payments on for 15 years while you've been building your business. The house that's in my name, only because your credit was ruined by a gambling debt you never told me about." Robert's face went white. "Margaret, don't what? Don't tell the truth? Don't be honest like you're being honest?" I unfolded the paper with deliberate care. "This house that you've been using as collateral for business loans, the house you promised Jennifer you'd sell so you could buy something bigger in Phoenix." The room was dead silent except for the sound of paper rustling and someone's quiet crying. "You can't sell what isn't yours," I continued, my voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom. "And you can't take what you never owned." I reached into my purse again and pulled out another document. "This is the business partnership agreement you had me sign 10 years ago. The one you said was just a formality for tax purposes. The one that makes me a 50% owner of Richardson Accounting Services." Robert was backing away from me now, his face gray. "You don't understand business, Margaret. You can't just..." "Can't what? Can't protect myself from a husband who's been stealing from our joint accounts to fund his affair? Can't defend myself from someone who was planning to leave me destitute while he starts over in Phoenix?" I pulled out a thick manila envelope, the one I'd been carrying in my purse for 3 weeks, ever since I'd hired a private investigator after finding those Romano's receipts. 2 years, you said? Try 4 years, Robert. 4 years of hotel receipts. 4 years of jewelry purchases that never made it home to me. 4 years of vacation expenses for trips I never took. The envelope contained everything: photographs, financial records, text message transcripts, receipts, even the lease agreement for the apartment Robert had been renting for Jennifer under a false name. 4 years of systematic deception, all documented in painful detail. But the most devastating evidence was the letter inside, a handwritten note from Robert to Jennifer, dated just 2 months ago, outlining his plan to divorce me immediately after David's wedding. He'd calculated how to hide assets, how to claim the business was failing, how to leave me with nothing while starting fresh with her in Arizona. "Did you really think I was that naive?" I asked, my voice carrying across the silent room like a bell. "Did you think 32 years of marriage to an intelligent woman would teach me nothing about protecting myself?" I turned to face the room full of guests, our friends, our family, people who had celebrated every milestone of our marriage. "Robert planned to serve me with divorce papers tomorrow morning," I announced. "While we were supposed to be cleaning up from our son's beautiful wedding, he was going to destroy our family with legal documents he's had prepared for months." David was staring at his father with an expression of absolute disgust. Sarah had stopped crying and was holding David's hand, both of them looking at me with something like awe. "But here's what Robert doesn't know," I continued, opening the envelope and pulling out one final document. 3 weeks ago, when I discovered his affair, I filed for divorce myself. And thanks to community property laws and his own stupidity in putting our assets in my name, Jennifer won't be getting the fresh start Robert promised her. The room erupted, not in shocked silence this time, but in actual applause. People were standing up, cheering, shouting support. Linda was crying and laughing at the same time. Even some of Robert's own relatives were clapping. Robert stood there in his expensive tuxedo, holding his champagne glass like a prop in a play he no longer understood. Jennifer had fled the room entirely, leaving her purse and wrap behind. I spoke up to protect my future, not to shame him, I said, my voice carrying clearly over the murmur of the crowd. But when someone attacks you publicly, you have every right to defend yourself publicly. The house stays with me, I announced over the noise. The business stays with me. The retirement accounts stay with me, and Robert gets exactly what he's contributed to our marriage in the last 4 years. Nothing. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Robert tried to argue, tried to claim I was being vindictive, tried to turn the situation back on me, but 200 witnesses had just heard him publicly humiliate me at our son's wedding, and the evidence in my manila envelope was irrefutable. David grabbed his father by the arm and physically escorted him out of the reception. I heard him say, "You're not welcome at my wedding, and you're not welcome in my life. Don't contact me, don't contact my wife, and sure as hell don't contact my mother." Sarah, bless her heart, immediately took charge of salvaging the reception. She asked the DJ to start the music again, encouraged people to return to their seats, and made a short speech about how love and family means supporting each other through unexpected challenges. She was more mature at 26 than Robert had been at 59. The party continued, but it was different now. People kept coming up to me, offering support, sharing their own stories of betrayal and recovery. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who was 83 years old, grabbed my hands and said, "Good for you, dear. I wish I'd had your courage 50 years ago." Robert's brother Tom apologized profusely for Robert's behavior and offered to help me with anything I needed. Even Jennifer's co-workers, who had been invited by Robert, came over to tell me they'd had no idea about the affair and thought what he'd done was unforgivable. But the moment that broke my heart and healed it simultaneously was when David and Sarah came to me during the father-daughter dance. They asked if I wanted to dance with both of them, since they said I'd been both mother and father to David for years anyway. Standing on that dance floor, swaying to Unforgettable with my son and new daughter-in-law, I realized something profound. Robert's betrayal had been devastating, but his public cruelty had given me something I'd never had before: the undeniable moral high ground and the support of everyone who mattered. The divorce proceedings were remarkably simple, thanks to the evidence I'd gathered and Robert's spectacular public confession. His lawyer advised him to accept my terms without contest, since fighting them would only expose more of his financial deceptions and make things worse for him in court. Within 6 months, I owned the house outright, had full control of the business, and received a settlement that guaranteed my financial security for life. Robert moved to Phoenix with Jennifer, but their relationship didn't survive the scandal. Apparently, she hadn't signed up to be the other woman in such a public spectacle, and the stress of being known as the secretary who broke up a 32-year marriage was too much for her. David and Sarah moved back from their honeymoon, more committed to family than ever. They asked if they could have Sunday dinners at my house every week, just the 3 of us, to rebuild what Robert had tried to destroy. Sarah even started calling me Mom, something that filled the hole in my heart I didn't know existed. The business thrived under my management. It turned out that Robert's clients had been frustrated with his increasingly erratic behavior for years, and they appreciated my organized, reliable approach. I hired 2 new accountants and expanded our services. Within a year, we were more profitable than we'd ever been under Robert's leadership. But the most surprising change was in myself. For 32 years, I'd defined myself as Robert's wife, David's mother, someone whose identity came from supporting other people's dreams. Suddenly, at 63, I was discovering who Margaret was as an independent person. I started painting again, something I'd given up when David was born. I traveled to Ireland, the trip Robert and I had canceled to pay for the wedding. I joined a book club, took cooking classes, and even started dating a widower I met at church who appreciated my intelligence and independence. The saddest part was Robert's attempts to reconcile. He started calling 6 months after the divorce was final, claiming he'd made a mistake, that he missed our life together, that Jennifer had never understood him the way I did. He wanted to come home, wanted to rebuild what we'd had, but I'd learned something important in those months of rebuilding. I didn't want what we'd had. I wanted what I had now: self-respect, financial independence, and relationships built on mutual honesty instead of comfortable deception. It's been 3 years since that wedding reception that changed everything. David and Sarah have given me a beautiful granddaughter, Emma, who fills my house with laughter every Sunday. The business is more successful than ever. I've traveled to 12 countries and painted over 40 canvases. Robert still lives in Phoenix, working for someone else's accounting firm and renting a small apartment. He sends Christmas cards every year, signed with love and regret, but I throw them away, unopened. Some betrayals cut too deep to heal, and some people prove they never deserved the love they received. That old wedding photo sits in a frame on my mantle now, not hidden in my purse. It reminds me not of what I lost, but of how far I've come. The young woman in that picture believed love meant sacrifice. The woman I am now knows love means respect. The hardest part wasn't the divorce or the public humiliation, or even rebuilding my life at 63. The hardest part was accepting that the man I'd loved and supported for 32 years had been willing to destroy me completely for his own convenience. That takes a special kind of cruelty, and it teaches you things about people you never wanted to learn. But here's what I learned about myself. I'm stronger than I ever imagined, smarter than I gave myself credit for, and deserving of love that doesn't come with conditions or expiration dates. Do you think I was right to expose Robert's betrayal so publicly, or should I have handled it privately? Have you ever had to choose between protecting someone else's reputation and protecting your own dignity? What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever faced something like this in your own family? Please share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to tell me what city you're watching from. Thank you so much for listening. Until the very end, this is Letters to Helen, and I'll see you in the next story.